Hello, everybody. Grace and peace, and welcome to this panel that we're having today. It's good to have all of you here. I am Megan Benson. For those of you who may not know me, I'm the chaplain here at the Divinity School. We are glad that you are here. We are hoping to begin what is an ongoing discussion in this community around what we're calling the pastoral and ecological responsibilities around death, and specifically the body. So I'm very grateful to Dr. Ellen Davis, who's going to offer some remarks, to Reverends Joe Ananias and Stephanie Yancey, who are also, AHS has co-sponsored this event, and later when we have questions, particularly if some of those questions may be very specifically directed to our panelists, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, but if some of those questions might be more pastoral in nature, then Joe, Stephanie, or I might be able to respond for those questions. Dr. Davis, too. So, many of the people gathered here in this room are either hoping to be pastors or are training people who might be leaders in theological education. And so I'll just name, in my own 15 plus years in professional ministry, I have had much more vision and activity around planning the rituals after death in terms of helping a family craft a funeral or a memorial service. I'm sure I'm not the only clergy person who has sort of outsourced issues around the physical body to funeral homes. And I just want to name that I don't want to use this panel or this platform to argue against funeral homes. I know several wonderful funeral directors who have a lot of care and see their work as a ministry. However, most of you will already know and understand the traditional options around death, that being embalming, burial, and cremation. So with this panel, we hope to begin equipping you with information and knowledge around alternatives to those traditional options. Certainly, we would not be having this panel if we did not think that these alternatives provided significant value. In an age of ecological crises, it is increasingly important to consider the environmental impact of burial and cremation. Many of you will also be on the front lines of aging communities who are considering end-of-life plans. You could have an important role in shaping the imagination of your congregations, and we hope you will. So I want to introduce our panelists today. We have Hunter Beatty, who is with, that's right, Endswell Aquamation in Hillsborough. Gwendolyn Keith is the program coordinator for the Anatomical Gifts program at Duke. And Heidi Hannapel, sorry, and Jeff Maston are at the Blue Stem Cemetery, which is a conservation cemetery. So a couple little logistics before I invite Dr. Davis up. I will be the MC for the panel today, so I have a couple of questions to get this started. If you find yourself having questions in the midst of this, you may have received paper when you came in. If not, there are some baskets along the center aisle. Feel free to grab a piece of paper and a pencil and write those questions down. If you have a question, Tyler? Tyler is right over here, and we'll sort of gather those questions, and especially if we see questions that are repeated, we will definitely try and address those for this time we have together. So, and before we begin with these panelists, I would like to invite Dr. Ellen Davis, who is our Amos Reagan Kearns Distinguished Professor of Bible and Practical Theology.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Christ is risen. Hallelujah. I am here, and just to speak for a couple of minutes, not as a pastor. The only bodies for which I have ever had responsibility on the other side of death are those of my parents, my husband, and in anticipation, my own. But I am an elderly witness to human finitude. And that's really my qualification for being concerned about this issue. I have all my adult life prayed that we might not die suddenly and unprepared as part of the Great Litany in Lent. But it's only in recent years that the physical preparation for death has begun to weigh upon me as a responsibility I needed to take on as a Christian. This really became sort of an issue for me about 5 years ago when my husband and I were redoing our wills. And by then, I knew that cremation, standard cremation, was not a sound ecological option. But I did not know what the alternative was. And it took me about 2 or 3 years of inquiring to find out. I mean, I didn't even have a word. You know, if you Google alternative to cremation, you don't come up with a whole lot. And so, at least I didn't. And as you can imagine, I know probably thousands of clergy, and I kept asking people, and they kept saying, well, we don't know. So we decided, Megan Benson and I decided, sometime like late last summer, that we needed to do something like this so that you all would have an answer for people who might be inquiring. I will simply say that over the last year, I have felt a kind of holy envy, especially for colleagues in Muslim and Jewish communities, in which bodies following death are handled by people in their community, people who have known them. And in addition to wanting something that was ecologically sound, I also wanted that kind of personal attention. And certainly, anointing of a body, Megan has done that in our family in recent weeks. But I also was concerned about my husband's body being tended with care following his death. And so I will say that happened. What we chose was water cremation, so to speak, alkaline hydrolysis. And there was for both of us, and this was a decision that we made a few years ago, as I said, when I finally figured out what I was looking for. That was a decision about which we felt a deep rightness, and living it out, I continued to feel that sense of rightness. It is truly a dust to dust, ashes to ashes experience, and there is a wholeness and a beauty about that is not a small part of making one's peace with death. And I say that not only on behalf of myself, but also members of my family, not all of whom are religious. And one member of my family said, for whom religious language and religious customs are not always meaningful, said that this death and what followed the death, what preceded and followed it, she said, this is perhaps the most beautiful experience I have ever had. So I just want to say that there's a practical dimension of what we're doing here, but there's also an intensely personal dimension. And I see this as part of Christ's ministry Christ's ministry of reconciliation, reconciling us with the physical world, of which we are a part, but from which we have become so alienated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. Just a reminder, if you do have questions that come to mind, to sort of get them to the basket in the center aisles. And I'm going to begin. I'm just going to ask for each of these panelists to give a little bit of a elevator pitch on what their particular role is as it pertains to death and bodies. So would each of you be willing to give your elevator pitch? And Hunter, we'll start with you.
Hello? Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Hunter Beatty, and I'm the owner of Innswell Water Cremation. For all practical purposes, aquamation, also known as alkaline hydrolysis, is an environmentally friendly alternative to flame cremation. In flame cremation, the body is placed into a cremation chamber called a retort, and it is heated to 1800 degrees. During the combustion of the body, toxic gases and greenhouse gases enter the atmosphere through a chimney. Nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, as well as carcinogenic compounds that are created during the combustion process. So as an alternative, aquamation involves circulating an alkaline solution made of 95% water and 5% potassium hydroxide around the body for 3 to 4 hours. This process, alkaline hydrolysis, basically converts the fats, carbohydrates, and proteins in the body into sugars, salts, amino acids, and peptides. This is a sterile solution devoid of DNA or any pathogens, and then this solution is filtered and then goes to a regular wastewater treatment facility. So this is an alternative to combusting the soft tissue of the body and putting it into the atmosphere, into the air that we breathe. It uses approximately 1/10 of the energy as flame cremation, and of course has no toxic or greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why it's a more environmentally conscious choice.
Just quick follow-up. There
Yeah.
are remains.
Yes, so the entire skeletal structure remains. Our bones are comprised of calcium phosphate. These are returned in an urn, same as flame cremation. We return approximately 20 to 30% more remains than flame cremation because the chimney effect in a cremation chamber also carries bone dust up into the atmosphere.
Okay, thank you. Gwendolyn.
Hello, I'm Gwendolyn Keith, and I'm the coordinator of the Anatomical Gift Program at Duke School of Medicine. So I work with people who are planning their deaths, who are planning to donate their bodies for medical education, to be the silent teachers in our anatomy labs and our surgical labs here at Duke. So once somebody decides they want to go through that route, one of the reasons people decide to do that is because they want, one, their death to be meaningful. They recognize that their body is not going to be terribly useful to them right after they die, and they'd like their body to have another use, so to speak. They want to be of service. They want to give back to the medical community who have helped support them through their lives. They want to help teach. So our silent teachers are basically our professor emeritus in our labs, and a lot of people are very excited to be able to teach at Duke. We have a lot of people who make that choice because they both want to give back, but also are concerned about the stress on their families. What to do when they die, because they've seen circumstances where families have been really distressed through a whole funeral process and burial and such. And then there's also the financial issues. A lot of people choose to donate their bodies for medical education for financial reasons because we do pay all the costs. So while we still have the embalming process for our anatomy teachers, we are working to explore. There are some new green embalming processes that are being tried in a number of different places, and so it's possible that we will be going green and reducing that formaldehyde. Our donors often teach for over 2 years, so it's an incredible gift that lasts a long time. The gift of learning through medical education both teaches our students anatomy, but also our physicians, our residents get to learn new techniques, try new procedures. It's kind of nice when people practice on somebody that's not you before they do some things. um, it's an opportunity for incredible deep learning, and our students just really bond with their silent teachers. It's just a very sacred experience that they have. Once our teachers complete their teaching, we do cremate. We don't do it here, but we do. It's off-site, and it is fire cremation. We're working with a number of people now who are choosing aquamation, who want to work with aquamation and work with hunters, so we can have those the remains picked up as well, and they can be aquamated as well, or buried in a more environmental way. But that's kind of in a nutshell.
Thank you. And Heidi and Jeff.
Okay. I'm Heidi Hannapau. I'm the co-founder and co-director of BlueStem, and it is such an enormous project. It takes two of us to talk about it. This is my partner here, and we'll probably do a back and forth dance about what BlueStem is.
So BlueStem is not just one thing. BlueStem it's a community, it's a place of worship, it's a nature preserve, and it's a green burial cemetery, all in one place. And you'll see a slideshow as we're speaking here. Just some images of what we've created. It's we've been at this for quite a while. The first idea of this came up in 2006, and we started working together on this project in 2016, and opened last November. We're located in Hillsborough, or just north of Hillsborough, in this town of Cedar Grove, on an 87-acre farm where we believe nature is enough.
So we love all of the things that you're describing as well. We think about our work as a ministry to the land and a ministry to people. We've been doing conservation work all of our careers, and BlueStem is the ultimate, we call it our swan song conservation project for the community. Essentially a place that people can come to grieve, to practice green burial, to volunteer on burial crews, to help us build trails, to support families who are grieving, but also for self-care, simply to come and walk the paths and be in nature, which we as conservationists have always considered a holy place.
And green burial, which you've seen some images of, our project really focuses on the simplicity, and we utilize green burial as the tool to bring people to their final resting place. And it's a very, very participatory process with families, where you're not a witness, you are a participant in the process. We have volunteers at every burial that also support the families and will do the things that the family may choose not to. Families are invited to lower their loved ones into the earth, but if they choose not to, our volunteers can do that. Families are invited to actually close the grave, but if they choose not to do that, our volunteers will also do that. So it's an opportunity to, what we've been told by the families that have actually already participated in the burials at our property is it actually helps them start their grieving process in a much more tangible and meaningful way.
And for our volunteers, it turns out to be a very sacred act of service, showing up for complete strangers, but being willing to be participants in this wherever they leave off. And then finally, after the experience, we've had family members turn to us who will say, "Now what?" And we'll encourage them to stick around, to walk the pathways, to stay at the grave sites, to use BlueStem for their benefit as well.
And thematically, based on what we're here to talk about today, BlueStem is a very large ecological and environmental and climate resilient project. That is the reason we built it. That's our kind of where we come from. And we know that there's a way of marrying the act of burial with the sustainable practices that are available to us. And we actually have worked with Hunter. We've interred folks that have actually gone through the Gwendolyn's program as well. So it's all of these things can work together. They're not necessarily just independent.
I appreciated Ellen speaking to the funeral homes, or maybe it was you, Megan, but we really think that the funeral homes are providing a service to families that we can't always do. We're there as the cemeterians and the ministers for the land, and once the family shows up, we help take care of them. But there are a lot of questions that folks have and need the help, actually of guidance. People like all of you will be prepared to do one day. One of the things we wanted to show with this slideshow was just the ways in which the graves actually become part of the conservation work that we're doing out there. So we're recreating grasslands out in a former farm that has been where the fields have been used for agriculture for many, many years, and that's part of our conservation mission. So that's why we call it conservation burial as opposed to green burial. It's taking green burial one further step in the permanent protection of this beautiful place. We'd love to have you come visit.
So my next question, and Heidi and Jeff, you've both sort of started getting into some of that, so I might start with you. Could you share a bit about the journey that brought you to this particular work, and in what ways you see it as part of your wider vocational or sort of just core commitments and values?
So as I mentioned, I started thinking about this in 2006 when I went to a conference and witnessed a gentleman named Billy Campbell, who started the conservation burial movement in the U.S. And I was a conservation director, so I was out buying land and trying to find ways of affording and paying for that land. And this just felt like a perfect marrying of the interests of individuals, their value systems in connecting to nature, and the perpetual protection and burial of those same individuals in that space. So move that fast forward to 2015, 16. Heidi and I individually helped our parents die at home. So we went through this very personal process of helping our parents, guide our parents through the decision making and the physical and the emotional aspects of death. And we also recognized the fact that what we witnessed was not necessarily what had to be. And we knew that we had something that we could bring to this region and other parts of the country where we do this work that could be meaningful and actually could be a change. We could act as change agents to what is expected to be the way in which someone is buried, or what a cemetery has to look like. And that's where Bluestem evolved into.
Yeah, I'll just add little pieces to that. I think if any of you have been through the experience of a very personal death of someone you love, you know that it's all-consuming. Both of us actually stepped away from our jobs so that we could care for our parents and allow them to, or give them their last bit in their homes. That was difficult. You know, your identity gets sort of removed in that caregiving position as well. It's very demanding and emotional, like you're saying. And neither of our parents were too interested in talking about their journey, which was also a struggle for us. We were good friends at the time and supported each other a lot through that difficult time, and came out of that and talked about how this was not how we wanted things to go down for ourselves. Talking about planning is really important. There's we wanted to bring death out of the shadows and have us fear it less by knowing a little bit more about what our options are and having some more control over what we wanted for ourselves. And being in nature all the time, just through our work, we knew we do life and death every day. Nature is also the place that I ran to when I needed comfort. It's such a healing space naturally, and that was automatic for us in terms of thinking about how we could bring our expertise in our professions together with personal change in our own lives to create something that was really meaningful for this area. There aren't any conservation burial grounds within 2 or 3 hours of where we're located. There are only 13 in the country. Bluestem is number 13, lucky 13. And so we really wanted to make this project happen here, now, and it feels very timely.
Thank you. Gwendolyn, what about you? What brought you to this work?
Very roundabout way, but I guess it's, I grew up, my dad was in the public health service, and I grew up in Alaska with a lot of the native people there, and spent time in the hospital there. The families just come and camp out in the hospital, and I witnessed a lot of deaths and how families handled it. And then fast forward, I was in the Peace Corps, and I've lived a lot of places in the world, and I've witnessed death handled in such different ways. In fact, I was quite shocked when I started dealing with death in my own world here in the United States and how it was handled. I've been an organic farmer, so I've also worked with death, life and death, and the cycles of life and death. And I had just been, I'm an ordained minister of healing as well, and worked a lot with trauma and grief. And I was recruited for this position, kind of nothing I would have planned to do after I assisted with, I had assisted with 4 family members, done hospice for them, and also they all chose to donate their body for medical education. Since we come from a medical family, and it's just so important for us to be able to contribute to people's knowledge. But, and the donations didn't happen at Duke, but the sacredness of both holding space for hospice, for dying, watching the evolution of families come to terms with difficult deaths. My sister died at 45. We had a year-long process of hospice with her, and she was very adamant about donating her body because she didn't want anybody to have to go through what she went through, and in hopes of people finding a cure or different ways to treat it. So I had, I was basically asked to do it, and I said yes, and it's been an incredible learning. I see my job as a sacred counselor to support people in how they want to approach their deaths. I get phone calls from so many people trying to find meaning in their suffering, or also meaning in their, what will happen to me next? I don't want things to just end. I want to provide a legacy. I want to be of service. So it's very poignant. I also serve in many ways as a funeral director, because when families, when the donors, when people pass away, and their families need support, and what do I do? So I guide them through the whole process and pretty much take care of everything for them, so to make it easy.
Wonderful.
I'll just leave it there.
So I moved here from New York when I was 19 to live at an interfaith community in Mebane, of all places. We converted waste vegetable oil into diesel fuel. We ran a nonprofit involved in prison reform. We would read from various religious texts, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, Buddhist Pali texts. And I lived there for about a year and then got into renewable energy, biodiesel, solar. In my early 30s, I fell off that path of service work and renewable energy. My wife and I had homesteaded for 4 years. We raised pigs, chickens, ducks, turkeys on a little mini farm, and I renovated this old farmhouse. And that led into real estate, where my job became flipping houses, which is the lowest level of real estate. It's not like designing beautiful, architecturally interesting homes that your grandchildren will see. It is, it's the lowest level, and I hated it. It was soul-sucking, and I was searching for something more meaningful. And then I was renovating a house in January of 2022. I was on my phone waiting for a contractor, and I read that former Archbishop of Cape Town, South Africa, Desmond Tutu, had chosen to be aquamated rather than cremated. I had never heard of aquamation before, but these articles made this very compelling case that the use of carcinogenic chemicals like formaldehyde, placing preserved bodies into non-biodegradable caskets, interring those in concrete burial vaults, and then taking up public land for cemetery space in the middle of town in the midst of an affordable housing crisis was just not a sustainable practice moving forward. So a week and a half after reading that article, I bought an aquamation machine. If you had asked me a year and a half ago what I wanted to do, I would have rattled off like, oh, Doctors Without Borders or Innocence Project or something, even though I was never going back to school for anything like that. Funeral work would have been so low on the list. I mean, I would have laughed. I mean, the idea of mortuary science, working with dead bodies, but it has become the most profoundly meaningful thing that I could have imagined. It's what I was searching for, that perpetual existential crisis of searching for something meaningful to do with my one life on the planet. It has filled that void, and I'm shocked it's what it is, but last year I just spent the entire year getting Innswell water cremation off the ground, and I'm very grateful we were able to do it. So that's it.
Before I get to some of the questions, I just want to name. Hunter has also done tremendous work. You walk into the Aquamation studio and it looks like an art studio. He has done so much to curate local artists from all across the state, various different, everything from glass to pottery to wood to bamboo. I mean, it's beautiful. I took pictures when I was there because he's really worked to make sure that if people may choose just simple bamboo for their remains, but he's also worked to create relationships with local artists and for people to be able to have some choices. And even cloth material for people who may be part of traditions where that is important for that to continue to compost in the ground. So I'll just name that. So I've started having questions. If there's more that come, please let me know. Some of these are a little bit repetitive. Could y'all speak to some of the cost comparisons to these different options compared to traditional burial? I know Gwendolyn named that you cover all the costs for families of whatever they choose.
Sure. And I can give you some examples of costs because I'm always negotiating with funeral homes. Funeral homes charge a huge range of fees for their services, and it is wonderful how they provide care for the family. Some funeral homes will, for example, some funeral homes will, charge $6,000 for a kind of basic funeral and in casket and in-ground burial. I mean, it can range. It totally ranges. There's commercially owned funeral homes and locally owned funeral homes. A basic cremation, fire cremation, they start at about $1,200 and to $200, but there's all fees there's all sorts of fees added on to things. Um, well, anyway, so what we've tried to provide for at Duke School of Medicine, we've been working really hard to cover all the costs of picking up a body when somebody dies, picking up from home, from a hospital, from a hospice, from a nursing home. The other cost is filing death certificates. Then there's, say, if the body's going to be embalmed, we cover the embalming that we do. We also freeze some of our donors because for different purposes. But it can range. We've had funeral homes charge $5,000 to bring a body to us. And they don't, and the funeral home only brings the body and files a death certificate. And that was from 30 miles away. And that same cost just for transportation to us and filing death certificate can also be about $500. And then we cover all the costs for cremation and everything else. So, does that answer that question? Any other questions about that?
Yes.
Figure that compelled my attention, because I was in touch with both Gwendolyn and Hunter, and we did not know that my husband would be shortly dying. But I remember being in touch with you maybe a year ago, Gwendolyn, and I said, do you have bodies just coming out your ears? I mean, do you need bodies? And you said, oh, yes, because everybody over there needs bodies to do their research. And you said you often pay for them at times?
So we pay the cost to bring the bodies to us.
Okay.
But sometimes when we don't have enough donors, we don't have enough silent teachers ourselves, we have to procure from different body donation programs. And we work with one in Maryland that we know is ethical. But so it costs us about $4,500 for a body for medical education.
So I'll just say that from a donor's perspective, I mean, my husband and I have benefited over and over and over again from Duke Health. And, we each have one last gift to make. What I did not count on, so, that was part of our thinking, that we simply wanted to give back, as you said. What I was not counting on was how much care we received from you all in return. So, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if Jeff and Heidi or Hunter also want to answer some of the questions around cost in terms of aquamation or...
Okay. So funeral homes have this FTC and funeral board regulated document called the General Price List. They are very bloated. They're huge. They're overwhelming. They charge for additional chairs beyond 20 for your service, so $15 per additional chair beyond 20. You're dealing with a traumatic experience. You're overwhelmed, and you might enter thinking you would spend $2,000, and you could be out the door spending $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. So part of our model is that we wanted to simplify this. So we have one package. We don't have a bloated general price list. We charge $2,500. That includes pickup within 50 miles of Innswell and Hillsborough, transportation to our facility, the aquamation service, 3 death certificates, and then return in an eco-friendly bamboo urn. And then sometimes families order additional death certificates or buy one of our custom unique urns made by a local artist. But for the most part, someone can go on our website and just literally book with us without any interaction, or typically what happens, we meet the family, which is, of course, the more meaningful part of this process. And we meet the family in person, and then we hand deliver the ashes to them at their home. So in our area, cremation runs between, I think, $1,200 and $4,000 for some of the more traditional established funeral homes who have been in the area for, let's say, 100 years. So we priced Aquamation right in the middle of that, and people have found it very affordable, especially for something that's more environmentally conscious. So.
I think the word that is coming to my mind for us in relation to all of this is simple. Jeff talked about that. One of our values is simplicity, is thinking about this beautiful place where we're trying to impact as lightly as possible. And simplifying also the process for families. He spoke about how we invite families into participating in the service. Families can actually choose to take care of their loved ones after death. Hunter might be able to tell us something about that in a bit. We don't assume that all family members will want to take care of a loved one after death, but that is an option. There are home funeral guides who can walk people through this. There are death doulas who are doing a lot of this work now. There are a lot of folks who are really trying to interrupt the way we have been thinking about death. And what we're doing, we're the cemetery. We're not a funeral home. We do play a role similar to a funeral home in that we receive people to come and purchase their plots ahead of time. And do you want to speak a little bit more to the plots? Price? Yeah.
Well, we bring them to Bluestem, and we invite you all to Bluestem because it's even our words and even the pictures don't fully bring you to the place of understanding what it is and the experience. But as Heidi was saying, there's what we're looking at is there's kind of the burial cost, but then there's the overall cost of dying. It's expensive. It's very expensive. So there are these choices that you can make as you go along. Do you work with a funeral home? Which funeral home do you work with? Their prices are really all over the map. They vary greatly. Do you want to have do you want to have calling hours? There's a price for that. Bluestem offers the experience of actually being able to have your service all at one place, which is at the graveside or at other parts of the property where you can host a service. So we have large plots. Part of our conservation mission is it's not about the number of burials that we have, it's the quality of the ecological system that we've built. So when in doubt, we will not bury in a space where there's a large tree and there's a root system that can be impacted. So our plots are 20 feet by 15 feet. So imagine the size of a living room. And then our cremain burial spaces are 5 foot by 5 foot. We charge $4,000 for a body burial site and $1,700 for the cremain burial spaces. And then we have a opening and closing fee associated with those at the time of burial.
So one of the questions is, how are your caskets eco-friendly?
Yeah.
And like, do they
Yes.
devoid of chemicals and things
Yes.
that would sort of break
So
down?
that's another opportunity for people to come and learn at Bluestem. We're actually carrying caskets made by local makers and a couple of makers further out west. We really love to support local products. All of our caskets are must be environmentally sound, must be biodegradable. People have chosen pine caskets, very simple plain pine caskets, a beautiful poplar casket, willow caskets. We have a lovely friend who's making willow baskets as caskets. There's a burial tray, which does not have a lid on it, and then there's a willow basket that does have a lid on it. People also choosing to be simply shrouded in a cotton sheet or in a handmade shroud. There are many several companies nationwide who make shrouds. We're really searching for someone locally here to make shrouds for us, have a couple of possibilities. Some people choose a cardboard box where the family can actually paint on the cardboard box and write messages before placing them in the ground. So the options are all there. We offer a few of them just so folks can get a look at them and touch them and sort of imagine them for themselves.
Another question, this is for Blue STEM. Do you work with families, with anybody that has sort of denominationally specific rites? Or do you, like, what is that process like? Or do you have clergy that come in? Or does it depend?
So far, we've had services that have had no religious denominational connection, more spiritual connections, to clergy that have consecrated the burial space itself. We're open to all denominations, all religions, and what the choices and the specific burial practices or rites are.
We really leave it up to the family to decide what they want for themselves. And that's been a freedom that actually we've heard from some of our folks who've come to be buried at Blue STEM, that they don't feel this, they feel they have the permission to craft a service of their own choosing, with music, with musicians, with singers, with dogs. We had one where several dogs got into a fight. But it's a real lively experience for these folks. Our most recent burial, the family literally walked their loved one from the hearse to the gravesite on a very cloudy, gloomy day. They were all decorated in beautiful, bright colors because the man they loved color. And it was striking to us to see this experience of, color and darkness and pain, suffering, but then also joy and an uplift and the birds and the sky. So there's a little bit of all of that, and that's part of what we'd love to have you all come and experience sometime.
So this next question, Joe and Stephanie, even Dr. Davis, I think this is a really important question, and I'm not sure I want to answer it on my own. So many of our parishioners are afraid they will not experience physical bodily resurrection unless their bodies are kept intact via traditional burial. And this often keeps many people from choosing medical donation, water cremation, regular cremation, etc. How might we as faith leaders help to ease these fears and speak to the larger Christian tradition of bodily resurrection? No, I'll let you start.
I'm an Episcopal priest. My name is Stephanie. I work with the Anglican Episcopal House. The Episcopal Church actually has a statement on cremation, and we have no problem with it. What I would say, not having to do with any statements, is if you believe in the resurrection of the body, then you believe in an all-powerful God. This body, so many bodies, are no longer bodies that humans can put together again. And so whatever we do that is treating this vessel in a holy way, and that includes cremation as we burn holy things when they are no longer to be used, in every thing that I know of, and I can only speak for the Episcopal Church, there is no issue whatsoever with cremation. The same would be true for aquamation or for other types of burial. It is more that we recognize that this holy thing created by God continues to be holy and is entrusted to God, who can resurrect the body. We will never know how that happens, but we know that we believe that it will. So That's my answer, Megan. You gonna add to it?
I think I would hearken back to some of what Dr. Davis said at the beginning, and I'm recalling how some years ago when I worked at Duke Chapel, I was actually carrying an urn of ashes on Ash Wednesday, and I was struck by the fact that, you know, in Scripture, sort of we are created from dust, and there is a return to that, and that God does beautiful things with dust. God creates and recreates with dust, and I feel like that's probably what would come to mind for me, beyond just the sort of sense of that God can do anything. I know, I do recall at one point hearing that there's like theologians or people writing in the Middle Ages about worms like regurgitating it, like all sorts of things. That is not sort of how I go. But there is a sense that even if you're buried, you still will decompose. So, I mean, really some of the modern things with embalming is now not as modern, but it's modern in the span of history. So it's worth being mindful that really for so much of the practices around burial, there was not necessarily a sense that the body would somehow be preserved indefinitely. So, we're sort of down to our last couple minutes. Any other questions that, and you're welcome to stay afterward. I'd also encourage you to check out the websites for Blue Stem, for Enswell. I don't know if there's a website for the Anatomical Gifts program, but I think that can also be a deep way to learn. I guess one question I had for you, Gwendolyn, I wonder, I could see some family, and I appreciate that you use the language of silent teachers, because I think language is so important and shapes imagination. I could see people just being worried that the dignity of their loved one wouldn't be treated well in that process, and I wonder if you could speak to that fear that people might have.
Well, absolutely. Well, I have to say that I was concerned coming into the position. You know, I wanted to witness it for myself, how our silent teachers are treated. And I can say that our students are awed and humbled and grateful for this incredible gift. And for a lot of students, going into the anatomy lab is very scary. They haven't witnessed a dead body before. But as they come out of it, well, for one, we teach them to treat them well. But it's also, it's like their first patient. And we treat our silent teachers like they are their first patient, and they are learning compassion. They are learning silent witnessing. They're learning listening through the body. They're reading this body and this history of this human. We also gather, I started gathering as much personal information about the donors because the students just love to learn about this sacred person who was so generous to donate their body. Who were they? And that has been really powerful. I work with the students. We're just in the process, actually, next week. They are holding their memorial service for their donors, and it is so powerful. Their memorial service, so they talk about their feelings, their experience, their gratitude, and it's all done within their own circles, so they can talk about some of the more difficult things, like holding someone's heart. We also have a memorial service for the donor families, and that's coming up in June, that I organize, and we have students talk and our instructors talk about their experience. But it is such a sacred experience, and students say it is the most profound experience in their whole medical school training, and they remember their donor forever.
Are they known by name?
We do not share their names. They are known, unfortunately, by number, because for HIPAA protection and just for the privacy of the family. But the students, they are known. The students usually give their donors a name, their silent teacher a name, because yes. But so there is incredible honor and it's very sacred.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being part of this today. I do hope this will be an ongoing conversation that we can have here at the Divinity School. Thank you all for coming, for Dr. Davis, Reverend Yancey, Reverend Ananias, you too. Thank you so much for being here, and if we could extend our gratitude. It's good to have you, and I do hope we can do this again. That'd be great. Thank you so much. I feel like you did such a good job of explaining aquamation that most people were like, oh, okay. You've probably been doing it for a long time.